right, guys, you know what time it is. It's time for the recap of the past weekend's Legacy Showcase qualifier. So let's get to it. Yeah, this past weekend was the Legacy Showcase qualifier. For those who don't know, that's a approximately 30-player tournament where the 3 top 8s from Showcase challenges throughout the season. Let's see, 3 times 8, that's 24, plus last chance entries. Basically, players who 5-0'd a last chance qualifier, they make up the tournament, and needless to say, it's incredibly hard to qualify. I'm very happy to qualify. I don't even know how many seasons in a row, but I've been having a good time in Legacy, that's for sure. And I even double qualified for this one, which doesn't grant me anything. It's just basically to say that I'm enjoying life, and I'm very happy about my continued success in Legacy. This tournament, I was lucky to win it last season. Top 1 qualifies for the Magic Online Champions Showcase, so that was, of course, the goal once more. As always, when I play to win. I try to make the best decisions, deck building wise, deck choice wise, in game to hopefully get to the promised land. That's just always the goal, right? Yeah, I guess spoiler alert, that did not happen this time, but I had insane games, and I'm excited to show you guys those today. I played blue-black. Pretty simple stuff. I guess worth mentioning is I play Consigned to Memory in my sideboard. I expected Eldrazi's to be out in force. And when I say in force, it's like 2 or 3 copies. When I tried to analyze the metagame, it was my prediction was 40% of this deck and 60% way different decks. So that's why I did not register control this time. Last time I had a very good grasp on the metagame, and I could kind of cover all angles. But this time, too many unknowns, too many one-off decks qualified, like 1 Doomsday, 1 Lands, 1 Mystic Forge combo. I could go on 1 Breakfast, 1 Maverick. It was impossible to build a well-rounded control deck that I was happy with. So I went with Old Trusty here. Not much to say about the main deck. I've been playing this for a while. Sideboard, double Coffin Perch for the mirror, double Dark Betrayal for the mirror, single Harbinger to, try and catch some players off guard, and then Consign to Memory to power the Eldrazi matchup. So let's get into some games. I have 5 interesting games lined up. Thanks so much for being here. Let's go. All right, round 1, I'm playing against green-black. Basically the Noble Ignoble Hierarch deck with a White of the Reliquary, and that was White of the Reliquary, not Knight of the Reliquary, toolbox. It looks like, let's check on my sideboarding here. I trimmed a Wasteland, I removed Daze on the draw here, I removed a Brazen, that's 5 cards. I brought in 2 pushes, 1 Go for the Throat, and 2 Consign to Memory because I wanted to counter triggered abilities off of Endurance. Let's see if that happens. I'm up a game here. I'm on the draw. My hand looks fine. I have, some Troll Reanimation. I probably have to dig a little bit before that. I have a Frog that's kind of a must deal with. And, yeah, no protection, though, so opponent could go nuts here and natural order me out of the game. Here's Fetch for basic Forest, which is already something that I find curious. It's kind of a sign of weakness, but let's see if that's the case. I ponder into a Force of Will, which is good protection for this turn, I think. I have the intention to cycle Troll on upkeep. Here's Noble Hierarch Cradle, good sequence from the opponent. Zenith for 1. This is not the card I dream of Force of Willing, but if my opponent goes and gets Allosaurus Shepherd, my Force Will is just dead. I don't have removal, so I force this card reluctantly, I will say. Opponent starts to chip damage here. I cycle on upkeep and reanimate the Troll. It's a good little trick to, get a fresh card off the top instead of what you already saw in Ponder. Island wasn't a particularly good draw, but it was cool. Here's Springheart Nantuko. So let's pause here a little bit. Springheart Nantuko, bestowed on a creature, basically says, when a land enters the battlefield, you can pay 2 mana, and if you do, you get a copy of the enchanted creature, which will be Ignoble Hierarch, sorry. So right now, the opponent can build an army of Exalted creatures, which can be very scary. Looks like the opponent just decides to go for the 1/1 here and hold up mana. Question is does that represent Endurance? That's kind of the only card I can think about here. Here's the Brainstorm. I attack for 6. So right now I have the choice between not doing anything and keeping the Psychic Frog for force fodder, or developing the frog. And I think because my opponent did not have a play last turn, I'm willing to accept my opponent can draw a Haymaker, and I will not have a Force Will ready right now. So develop Psychic Frog. I'm at 10 life. So this will turn into some kind of race. Here's Fetch for Surveil Land, and then Tuco gets activated. Opponent summons another Ignoble. The opponent keeps the card on top. Here's White of the Reliquary. So let's talk about this card a little bit. Green-black, 2/2 Vigilance. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. So, and you can, like, Birthing Pod away a creature to find a tapped land. That tapped land can be some different stuff, but let's get to that. Let's see if the opponent wants another Exalted creature here. Opponent's now on 0 cards, so no Endurance. It was just a land. The opponent decides to pay 2 mana to get another Ignoble copy. That's now 4 Exalted creatures in play, which means this Insect token cracks in for 5, and I'm at 10, so this is getting kind of scary. I can't do anything about that. Well, I could jump block, but that's not a winning play. Let's see what I can draw here. Animate Dead, that's not a good draw, so I give the Frog flying, and my intention is to discard some cards to Frog here to make sure that Troll plus Frog is lethal next turn. I think Animate Dead goes into it. So does Force of Will. I keep the Wasteland because I want to Wasteland my opponent's Gaia's Cradle. And I draw into Fatal Push. That is huge. So now I can choose to Fatal Push the white if I want to, while it's still summoning sick, or I can say, my opponent's probably going to send like one big Exalted creature, so Fatal Push is going to be a Time Walk on the opponent's turn. The risk of doing this is if my opponent has something like Veil of Summer, if my opponent makes some bigger Alpha Strike, if my opponent has some very annoying card off White of the Reliquary to go get, and my knowledge about the my opponent's deck here is gonna show. Let's see if I get away with it. Now the opponent is going to do some cool stuff revolving around Vigilance and activating White before I get to block. Let's see. So I'm at 5 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sacrificing a creature. Now I'm facing lethal. So, and here comes another surprise. Talon Gates of Madara. When it enters the battlefield, up to 1 target creature faces out. So this is like some Uro combo, I believe. And it's also a cool card to remove a troll temporarily. So this is why I asked my opponent, when does it come back? Sorry, I'm bad with old mechanics. But my opponent was all game face here, which is totally fine. So I just Googled it. And I realized this troll could, in fact, attack next turn. I have the Fatal Push to avoid dying. My opponent plays Endurance out here. Gets in for 2. Endurance my graveyard so I can't make the Psychic Frog flying again. The thing is that Endurance has reach anyway, so it wasn't that relevant, but it was still decent. Definitely the correct play. And I draw another Fatal Push. So now my plan is to attack with Troll. Basically say, are you going to triple chump? If that's the case, go for it, buddy. I'll be fine. But that's not the case, which means that Frog and Troll are both lethal. So what can the opponent draw? The thing is here, my opponent basically can't play around much. So my opponent goes for the Alpha attack. I block the 3/4. My opponent has exactly 3 damage here, but my Fatal Push will make me survive. I go to 1. I pump the Frog in order to kill the Endurance. Might as well. My opponent plays a creature, which means now my opponent can either triple block the Troll or single block the Frog. In either case, my opponent's dead here. And the game's over. Yeah, this game was pretty cool. I think I even I missed the fact that I could reanimate last attack when I attacked with the Troll. I could have reanimated, but simply because I was doing like a lot of calculations, I simply forgot to second main phase reanimate my opponent's blocker. So thankfully the Fatal Push was enough and I got the job done, but Yeah, that was not a good move. I liked everything I did leading up to that point. Basically, using my life as resource while pressuring the opponent as much as possible. And in the end here, I ended up with 2 lethal creatures, and not just 1 lethal creature. So sometimes the math on Psychic Frog matters a ton. So that means I get a good start to the tournament. Yeah, happy to start off with a win. A little bit of a shaky plays, a lot of good plays, but yeah, let's see if we can warm up and do good things. All right, round 2. This is game 3. Playing against Burnt Taco, who plays Bant Nadu. It looks like I've trimmed 1 Brazen, 1 Wasteland, and a Troll for 3 removal spells. I'm basically looking to keep my broken plan and hopefully also play a little bit of fair with that removal spell. This hand is fine. I don't want to pitch this reanimate, so I will go and look with Ponder if I can find a worse black card. And this is kind of ideal. So now I basically just have to decide if I believe Psychic Frog or Fatal Push would be the most clutch. So this is a pretty cool decision. I think my tiebreaker at the time was, let's grief the opponent, wasteland the opponent, and push their mana dork. So I end up pitching the frog here, I believe. Yep, pitch the frog here. Opponent's in a mold of 6. I get rid of Ponder. The opponent has 2 lands, Teferi, Nadu, and Nantuko left. The opponent draws a land, which is annoying for my plan. I can reanimate Grief, take Teferi, waste the land, kind of as I planned. Now the opponent's on Fetch Land Pass. Let's see if we can update this. Fetch Land Pass, 3 cards we know and 1 unknown, yes. I draw Ponder. So just good habit is to attack first. If the opponent decides to, what do I know? Fetch Savannah Plow, then I know that I want to look for Wasteland on my Ponder. It just gives more info whether my opponent lets me connect or not. My opponent's deck is basically a value deck, now to value deck, so the deck is not finishing the game necessarily, but it's putting a lot of game pieces into play. This Ponder is good. I like my days because I know my opponent has 3 drops in hand. So I draw the days, I play the land for flexibility. This fetch land lets me shuffle, this fetch land gets me revolt. My opponent plays planes out, so right now still no 3 cards in my opponent's hand, and they're kind of giving me a hard time. But I have a grief in play, so I mean, I'm not worried here. Ideally, I would have dazed something that turn, or I daze something next turn, but it looks like now with that land, the opponent can go place Nantuko first, then play land, which is kind of annoying for my plan, because that also means the opponent will have 4 mana when they play Nadu. So let's see if we can do a pivot here or still get some mileage out of our cards. Grief still chipping away. Here's Ponder. I play Ponder over Brainstorm because I actually like my hand. Let's see what we have here. I think I draw a Frog and get rid of the others. Yep. Draw the Frog with the intention to get rid of the others. Oh, maybe not. I actually like the Underground Sea on top. Yeah. Okay. So opponent had another land, so we still know 2 cards, 1 unknown. I can keep attacking with Grief, so now my plan is to just respond to the fetch and kill the Nantuko. And then kind of, deal with the Nadu later. Opponent fetches. I'm not too interested in the opponent getting more creatures in play. I fetched the Swamp here as a more or less free roll hedge for something like, I don't know, Back to Basics, Winter Moon, stuff like that. I think at this point in the game, it's a free roll, so it's just good practice. Here's Nadu. The days look silly here. The cool thing about this is I will go up to 3 cards in hand, which means my opponent might have to, it will be a chump block if I invest my whole hand. Only problem is the opponent has 1 unknown card, so that's kind of a hard decision to make, to put all your cards into the frog and lose to a source of plowshares. Let's see if we can draw anything that changes that decision. Looks like Entomb is the exact card for that job, so I try and go for Brainstorm. If I hit Reanimate, I can just put my opponent to bed. And in fact, I do hit Reanimate just in Animate Dead form, so if I put back Atraxa and Daze, I can present an Archon and bury my opponent. Here's Entomb, basically checking if my opponent's last card was Graveyard Hate, like Surgical or Fair Macabre, but that's not the case. My opponent loses Nadu and the Tundra down to the one unknown. And I think I end up discarding the Troll here. Yeah, I discard the Troll to put my opponent to 2 life. There's just something about if the opponent goes Nado, Shuko, and then I try and shut off as many fetch lands as possible in that, worst case scenario. My opponent does not have such a draw, and we take down the match with mid-game Reanimation, early game Grief, picking apart the opponent's hand, Wasteland, push to kind of trade resources. The Frog arrives, and yeah, pretty standard stuff from this deck. This deck is so versatile, and this was a very good example of that. That puts me at 2-0. Can't complain. Let's continue the winning. Okay, round 3. This is game 3. Yes, just double checking my notes here. This is game 3. I'm playing against Bant Beanstalk, which is not a good matchup. We have Ground Seal, we have Plows, we have Leyline Binding, we have a Draw Engine. So yeah, tough matchup. This hand is fine. I can hopefully get mileage out of these Wasteland. I'm always, when I have one or more Wastelands, I'm always looking to make the most of those cards. And if I can't, I want to brainstorm them away, or, So it's either, go hard on that strategy, or, try and make them not be in the way of my other plan, right? So when to know when Wasteland is a 0-mana Stone Rain and when Wasteland is a bad card has a lot to do with how well you can do with this deck, in my opinion. Let's see what I draw here. I draw another Animate Dead, which makes my pitching to Grief easier. Let me put it that way. So here I can think about griefing right away and then pondering, or I can ponder first and see if that changes the equation. It's always a tough one. I decide to ponder first, and I find Entomb, Grief, Reanimate. These are obviously insane cards, so which card am I pitching to Grief, and am I double pitching here? So I think I end up deciding that I want to double pitch, and I want to draw Reanimate first off the top. Yeah, I like this play a lot. So first I pitch Animate Dead. Pretty clear cut. Let's see what I see here. Okay, so if you're interested in like what's the play, etc., you should pause the video now and kind of think about what's my game plan. I have the second Grief coming. What do I pitch? I have Reanimate and Tomb on top of my deck. I have the double Wasteland. There's a lot of factors here. So when I see this hand, I immediately think, huh. So all of these white reactive cards, they're not that good if I can get to a point where I'm kind of forcing the issue if I present a Grief, right? Reanimating a Grief. Then my opponent can't fetch basic planes out of these lands. So what if I take Lore Unrevealed here, Grief once more, take the Ponder, and then I really try and make the most of these Wastelands? I Grief away the Lore Unrevealed because that's the only card my opponent can respond to when it comes to second Grief. I pitch Psychic Frog simply because it just trades with a Plow. It's not exciting. My opponent plays the Misty we knew about. Let's see if we can update our opponent's hand. Like this, I believe. Yep, 3 white cards, 1 unknown. So here I go. Reanimate on the Grief for a couple of reasons. First reason is I don't want to show my opponent the Wasteland if they have some kind of response. Second reason is if I'm reanimating with the Entomb that I have on top of my deck, I'm going to lose less life with the Animate Dead later. My opponent fetches Savannah, so this is kind of good, right? Then I look at my opponent's hand. The card they drew was Prismatic Ending. Unfortunately, that lines up pretty well against Animate Dead, so I decide to take it. I Wasteland my opponent's Savannah. My opponent bricks on land, which is exactly what I want here. The reason why I play out this Wasteland is I don't want my opponent to go end step, fetch Triome, and then I end up getting punished for that. I also don't want my opponent to fetch a Surveil land. That's actually the biggest reason. My opponent goes Surveil land, finds the next land, deploys, what do I know, up the Beanstalk. My opponent bricks once more here. So I know I'm supposed to try and beat a handful of white removal. Plow is gone, by the way. And there's only 1 Terminus and 1 Binding, so 2 unknowns in the opponent's hand, which could be Force Blue card. That's fine. And Tomb for Atraxa, I draw land. So I think what I'm supposed to do here is play land, Animate Dead, hold up the Wasteland, Still same logic. If my opponent goes Desperation Brainstorm off a Tundra or whatever, I want to punish right away with Wasteland. What I'm giving up is if Ataraxia resolves, then I can't draw into, more reanimation, more cantrip stuff. But I think holding up the Wasteland is good, especially because if this resolves, it's just a very good situation for me. I don't think this was the best. I can take Brainstorm Frog and another Wasteland, which is kind of funny. So also right now, my opponent can't, develop for Leyline Binding simply for the fact that they'll just get wasted. And in order for Leyline Binding to be good, they need non-basics in play, and then I can pounce with my double Wasteland Psychic Frog backup plan. So let's see if my opponent has a way back into this game, or this Atraxa will just ride towards the sunset. Fetch Basic Forest, and here's Carpet. Carpet is a good one. So right now I have two moves. One is Resolve, let them play. The second move is Wasteland my own land to make Carpet a worse ritual. But I think because I have the Psychic Frog here, and I don't think my opponent getting to 2 mana is that big of a deal. Famous last words. My opponent can still plow off of 1 white mana, second main phase. I just like, having the Psychic Frog, and then I can use my Wasteland on my Underground Sea next turn if I want to. Let's see what happens second main here. I actually can't remember. Maybe my opponent develops a Beanstalk, and this gets, at least a little bit interesting. Let's see. Up the Beanstalk it is. Opponent has 2 unknowns with the 2 white cards we know. I draw Negation, and this resolves, which is huge for me. So now I can go waste my own land, develop another Wasteland, take 6. My opponent only has 2 mana at their disposal. They end up finding the fetch land, so now the opponent can go Leyline Binding, draw an extra card. I respond to that Beanstalk trigger by countering it. And that means I'm getting in 1 more hit here and drawing an extra card. I actually feed the Frog here because, let's say I only attack for 7, my opponent's at 4, then I can't kill my opponent next turn with my 2 cards. So once more, a little bit of Frog math here, so get in for 8. The opponent's at 3. That means I draw any card, ditch it to Frog. And then I have a lethal next turn. And that's exactly what happens. My opponent draws nothing. They lose the game with Terminus in hand. I held their mana to a minimum. Sculpted my game plan around the double Grief, which wasn't all that strong at the time, but it was still a game plan that let my Wastelands do the work. I even draw a 3rd Wasteland like a champ, so I can deplete my own mana base as a countermeasure to Carpet of Flowers, and then get the job done here, despite the Atraxa trigger not being insane. I think I just drew like 3 cards, but it was still, enough to get the job done. Right now I'm 3-0, which means there's a possibility I can even lose 2 straight and still top 8. So yeah, looking very, very good and loving life at the moment. All right, this is round 4. I'm playing against 80 card, white-black Death and Taxes with a ton of hate. I saw so much hate game 2, so I have to get kind of creative here. I don't love the double Wasteland against that deck, but if they can take out, Scrubland here, Caracas there, tap Wasteland, this is fine. I'm not griefing turn 1. I'm looking to draw a random black card, use my Surveil to try and find a random black card, clear the way with Grief, play Frog, hopefully daze something, and be off to the races. Turn 1 Vial is annoying because I want my Surveil, but I also want to daze that spell. Of course, I see Reanimate here, which is kind of punishing, because I only have tapped black. I daze the Vial because this game is going to be long, and that card is going to be amazing later on. I Surveil away my second daze, generally not really what I want to do. Stoneforge Mystic is annoying, though. I do have the Grief to clear the equipment. Lion Sash was the card. So here's an interesting situation where the island really crushes me. If this is a black land, I can go clear my opponent's hand with Grief, Entomb, Reanimate, most likely win the game. But that's not the world we live in. I pitch my Psychic Frog. Let's take a look at that hand again. I take Lion Sash because with that card in play, things get so complicated. But I mean, my opponent's hand is also very complicated. So right now, I'm basically hoping my opponent goes for not Recruiter for Fairy Master, not Fairy Mastermind, Fairy Macabre. I'm trying to represent having a 3rd daze here and hope my opponent goes something like either Land Pass or kill my sewers. In that case, I will respond with Entomb, hope to draw Black Source and Reanimate, but it's not looking good here for the home team. Going for Mystic Attacks here, I believe. Chipping away at my life total. The thing is, I just milled over second days. There's just it's very hard to believe that my opponent will go and over respect that. So here's Wasteland, Recruiter of the Guard. I don't have the Wasteland. I believe I tapped this island because I wanted my opponent to think I was, insta brainstorming. But I don't know what that's gonna do because brainstorm sees even 3 more cards to look for the Entomb. Basically, I'm just crossing my fingers my opponent does not respect the 1-2 punch, which is highly unlikely. My opponent finds the Fairy Macabre, and all of a sudden, I'm in a tough spot. I obviously draw the Underground Sea here to laugh in my face. If I had the Underground Sea, I would have already, had an Atraxan play, draw a million cards. Sure, I might have gotten plowed, but I would have been in way better shape. So what I do here is waste the waste, and I kind of force the issue here. I try and reanimate my own grief to basically just trade for the Fairy Macabre. I think that's just how I'm supposed to play here. Fairy Macabre gets discarded. Unfortunately, not how I wanted it to be discarded. And here's a sick one. The opponent draws Thoughtseize. I still can't Entomb the response. And this is huge because my plan here was to find another reanimation spell before I'm dead, and then 1-2 punch with Entomb, but the opponent had other plans. I then again draw the enemy. Yeah, that's funny. I actually forgot about that. I draw the enemy dead to laugh in my face. I wasteland my opponent to try and keep them off, Yorion shenanigans. Fatal Push is not really what I'm looking for here. I don't think I'm winning this game the fair way, so I'm looking for Entomb. Opponent surveils away Solitude. That says something about their hand. It's filled with removal spells already. Solitude is card disadvantage, so makes sense. Still receiving some chip damage here. I can't remember. I think my opponent's considering either putting Yorion into hand or playing Aberration, or the third option, which is hold up Plow in case I have the 1-2 punch, so that when I reanimate Atraxa, the opponent can respond to the Atraxa trigger by plowing it, which means that's before I get to look for Force of Will and protect it that way. So lots of options here for the opponent, but it turns out they had an even better option, and second Fairy Macabre hits the opponent's hand. And this is where basically can't see how I win. I guess it all starts with a brainstorm, so let's brainstorm, see if I hit the nuts. I don't really hit the nuts. I hit another reanimate. I try and target Solitude, again, forcing the issue on the Fairy Macabre, so I'm kind of back where I started, and except I don't have an excess reanimation. Oh, yeah, I have Enemy Dead on top. So actually, yeah, same situation. I'm looking for Entomb. So what I'm doing here is, let's see, I think that, put Yoron to hand. They still have Double Plow, Skyclave, and Yoron in hand. So my line here is casting Brainstorm, hoping to find exactly land and Entomb on top 3. I know one of the cards, so... And I don't, so here's where I believe let's see if we can put on the chat. Joe chat. Yep. Good. I wish my opponent good luck in the top 8. My opponent's now 4-0. I'm 3-1. It was just so tough playing against, Lion Sash had to be dealt with, double Fairy Macabre. My opponent even showed Grafdigger's Cage game 2. They showed Containment Priest game 2. They showed even the 1 black, 1 colorless 2/2 with Adapt from Modern Horizons, another graveyard type card. Like, they showed so much hate, and I couldn't beat their deck the fair way. Basically, I had to win unfairly. Let's see how I sideboarded here. I actually forgot to mention that. So let's see. Looks like I cut Brazens and I added Fatal Pushes, and I more or less tried to just play my plan. And yeah, didn't work out. I'm now in the 3-1 bracket. Plenty of Magic to be played. Let's see what I can do round 5. All right, this is crunch time. I'm up a game versus Mental Misstep. Stefan Schütz, one of the absolute best players in the world. I can't say enough good things about Stefan. Class act, insane player, great mind for the game. Yeah, I want to be like Stefan when I grow up. We're playing the mirror. I'm up a game, and you know my sideboard plan in the mirror. If you followed me, I cut Grief and Entomb plus the fatties. I don't believe in uh, Christmas miracles. I believe in slow and steady wins the race, and I'm trying to take advantage of the opponent's graveyard. So that's the approach I'm using this game. Let's see if Stefan agrees with that. My hand is decent here. I have Force of Will in case of disaster. I have some reanimation, good mana. Okay, so I get Grief here. Grief, pitch Grief. I mean, it would be annoying to get Grief twice here turn one, but I think life goes on in that case. I lose Animate Dead. My opponent surveils. Surveils away another Surveil land. So that's kind of cool. Stefan has teched a little bit there. I draw Wasteland, and I think it's a fine play. Let's just, delay the game one more turn. I still have my same tools. Could get lucky. My opponent ponders. Now it's less likely that I get lucky. See what I can draw here. I draw Brainstorm, so I pass the turn. I don't want to cycle Troll unless I have to. But my opponent is not reanimating, so I guess they don't have reanimation right now. Otherwise, they would have just gone for Grief. Let's see what I do here. I think I Surveil. Yeah, Surveil and find a reanimate, so that's awesome, right? Now I can go Swamp, reanimate the opponent's Grief, and here comes a great play. Why is Stefan responding to the spell and not just to the trigger? Because fair enough, let's say my opponent has a bad hand with a Bowmaster, so they want that card in play. Why does Stefan respond here? And the answer I came up with real time was my opponent wants me to brainstorm in response to the Bowmasters, because then Daze is live. I decided not to bite on that. But the thing is, my opponent knows I'm going to pick up on stuff like that. So this is a great bluff play as well to make me not cast the Brainstorm, which is what I learn when I see my opponent's hand, which does not contain Daze. It does contain Force Will and 2 Brainstorms. So here I'm thinking, I'm doing great this game. I should just take this Force of Will, sit back on my own Force of Will, and then try and win with, I have Troll, Frog, Grief. Like, I have all the stuff here. And then make my opponent beat me with the top of their deck. So I take the Force of Will, despite it not being a very, it's not a value play, that's for sure. I believe my opponent will Brainstorm here and try and Sculpt. I'm fine with that. I'm also fine with land here. My opponent has 2 cards in hand. I cycle for C. I play the land out I just found. I hold up Swamp so I don't get, Wastelanded and Dazed. I guess that's not even possible. Okay, my opponent forces, we trade forces. I mean, I'm totally fine with this. Now I have a Troll. Grief will trade with my opponent's board, though, and I have a Frog, so I'm just doing fine here. My opponent with the double block. So I have a Troll and a Frog versus nothing. My opponent draws the card, then fetches. Reanimates Grief, which is a good play because it takes care of my Frog. And now extra lands doesn't really help me. I'm winning the race handily, though. Force of Will, bad draw because it doesn't do anything right now, and it requires me drawing a blue card or a 5th mana source in order to be live, and those wouldn't be very, sure, they can ice the game. If I draw a blue card, I can pass. But to my disappointment, Stefan goes Ponder and keeps the card. The opponent will not keep a card here that's not Dark Betrayal or Brazen Borrowers, so I kind of know I'm getting hit by one of those cards. In the meantime, my opponent starts their beatdown. Grief gets in for 3. My opponent's going to play correctly against the card Force Negation and pass the turn. And then on my upkeep, I'm 100% sure I'm getting my Troll killed here or bounced. Turns out to be Dark Betrayal. And I draw a blue card, which, I mean, it's not really good for me right now because now I'm on the back foot, right? Here comes Grief, and I'm at 7, which also means forcing is bad and fetching is bad, because then all of a sudden Grief is a 2-turn clock. Here's Psychic Frog, so I could force that and go to 6. I decide not to, which may have been a bad play. What I decide to do here is bounce my opponent's Grief, because there's a chance this card might not be castable again. I could have bounced Frog, but that's less damage. I draw Reanimate, which is a good draw. That puts me to 5, and then I just play the Brazen. I don't want my opponent to have, as the third card on the ponder, be a Daze, so I just play it. I'm face up here anyway. I don't have moves, so it's a good play. My opponent ponders once more and attacks with Frog. I set this up so I can't die to Frog. If my opponent discards the whole hand, I go to 1, so I take the damage. My opponent draws a card, which is not the best for me. My opponent pitches the Daze. They don't predict that card is going to do anything. Pushes my Frog. I draw Ponder, so I guess it's time to... Yeah, I see Brainstorm 2 bricks, but it's still better to take the Brainstorm because it just sees the same amount of cards. I don't get there. Stefan closes out the match here. Worth noting is, even though I have a flyer, if my opponent does not exile 3 cards, Psychic Frog is lethal. So, yeah, this game was so... I was looking so strong, but Stefan played to his outs here, forced the issue on the force, like trading forces, and then just drew better from there, which was required. Let's see, I believe I sent Stefan a nice message here as well, and saying that well played, good luck game 3. So now it's 1-1. In game 3, I ended up getting crushed. I wish Stefan good luck in the top 8, and I ended up missing top 8 on tiebreakers, however you want to slice it. It's pretty often that 3-0 in these small events, then double loss leads to top 8. But yeah, a few percentage points meant that I didn't top 8. I believe if my round 4 opponent on Death and Taxes won the last round, I would have top 8'd, but that's how it goes. If you lose 2 rounds of Magic, you can't expect to top 8. So that's just how it goes. I won 3 rounds, so we're sitting pretty. Then I played against an extremely tough matchup, and probably the best player in the tournament in this round. Stefan ended up taking down the tournament, and yeah, he qualified for his 4th Magic Online Champion Showcase, which is absurd. I feel incredibly blessed to have qualified for 1, to put that into perspective. But yeah, Stefan is amazing. I'm very happy that he ended up taking down the event. And I'm also happy that you guys checked out this video. So thanks so much for watching. I will see you very soon with more awesome high-level legacy content. And yeah, don't be a stranger. Thanks so much.